It was one of those heavy evenings in Seattle when the sky carried a strange shade of gray, thick clouds trembling with rain, and the air hinted at a storm that would drench everything in its path. Cars rushed past, windows fogged, people hurried with umbrellas, and the world seemed impatient. In front of a small grocery store, a young woman named Rachel stood trembling, soaked down to her shoulders as rain poured mercilessly. Her arms clutched something warm and fragile, a baby wrapped in a faded blanket, barely protected from the cold wind. Rachel didn't know who saw her, didn't care how strangers looked at her, and didn't notice her shaking hands. She only knew she couldn't leave that baby alone. She had found him abandoned on a public bench near a bus stop only minutes earlier, crying, frightened, and shivering. She didn't know how long he had been there, but his skin had begun to cool, his crying weak, and his tiny hands shaking. She knew she had no choice. Without hesitation, she picked him up and shielded him against her chest. Before the story continues, if you believe the world needs more kindness, compassion, and second chances, make sure you like this video, comment your thoughts, share it with someone who needs hope, and subscribe to the channel to support stories that change hearts. Rachel didn't have family in the city. She had moved from Ohio 5 months earlier, hoping to restart her life after losing her job during a sudden closure of the small diner she worked in. Seattle was supposed to be her chance at a fresh beginning. Instead, she spent most days working at a laundromat part-time and nights sleeping in a rented room she could barely afford. But tonight, something changed. The sight of that baby, abandoned and defenseless, awakened a part of her heart she didn't know existed. She held him close, shielding him from the storm, praying someone would help her find his parents, praying that he wouldn't fall sick, praying that whoever left him would come back. But no one did. The rain worsened, and Rachel stood outside the grocery store, hesitant to go inside because she didn't want anyone to think she had stolen the baby. Her clothes stuck to her skin, hair dripping, her shoes filled with cold water. She whispered apologies into the baby's ear, promising she wouldn't let anything bad happen. A car stopped. A sleek, black sedan, the type that didn't belong in her world. The door opened, and a tall man stepped out wearing a white dress shirt and dark trousers. He looked successful, confident, the kind of person who never stood in the rain willingly. His eyes softened instantly when he saw the baby in her arms. His name was Grant. He had rushed home after receiving a message from his assistant that there was an emergency at his residence. He assumed it was business-related, something financial or corporate. But when his car approached the neighborhood, something felt wrong, something deeper. It wasn't until he saw Rachel standing there, soaked, trembling, holding a baby, that his world shifted. He recognized the blanket, recognized the baby's face, the breath caught in his throat. Because this wasn't just any baby. This was Joshua, his newborn son. Grant froze, his heart pounding with disbelief. His wife had left 2 weeks earlier, struggling emotionally after birth, caught between depression and confusion. Grant had tried everything, therapy, support groups, quiet time, but she disappeared without warning, leaving the baby behind. He couldn't understand how or why or what pain drove her into that decision. Today, he returned from a business meeting to find Joshua missing. His security system had captured the mother leaving with the baby, but after that, she disappeared. He didn't know if she was safe, if Joshua was safe. He had been searching relentlessly, barely sleeping. Now, standing in the rain, Rachel holding his son, it felt unreal. Rachel loosened her grip, relieved that the baby finally belonged somewhere. But Grant didn't rush. He didn't accuse her. He didn't question. Instead, he stepped close, gently touching the baby's hand, whispering something Rachel didn't hear. Then he looked at her, not with suspicion, but with gratitude. She explained how she found Joshua abandoned on a bench, how he was cold and crying, and how her instincts forced her to pick him up. Grant listened quietly, tears forming behind his controlled expression. He could see Rachel was barely holding herself together. He invited her into his home, offering warmth, safety, and dry clothes. She hesitated, but the baby needed warmth more than she needed caution. The house inside was immaculate, bright, smelling faintly of vanilla. Rachel sat on a soft couch holding the baby, now wrapped in a fresh towel. Grant warmed milk, his hands slightly trembling. He fed the baby carefully, then looked at Rachel again with a softness she wasn't used to. They talked. He told her about Joshua's mother, the emotional decline, the confusion of responsibility, and the fear that he had already failed as a father. Rachel listened, her heart heavy. She told him about her life too, how everything collapsed when the diner shut down, how she worked long hours, how she prayed for a purpose, and how finding the baby felt like that moment. Hours passed. Rain softened outside, replaced by gentle tapping on the windows. The house felt peaceful. The baby slept. Grant offered Rachel money for helping, but she refused. She said kindness never required payment. That night, Grant insisted she stay in the guest room so she wouldn't go back wet and unsafe. She reluctantly agreed. Days turned into a week, then more. Grant insisted on giving her work. She helped organize Joshua's things, occasionally looked after him when Grant needed to step away, helped decorate the nursery with warmth rather than just luxury. She didn't realize how quickly she bonded with the baby. She hummed when rocking him, smiled when he giggled, touched his tiny palms gently, always grateful that her arms were the first thing he felt after being abandoned. Grant watched her often, quietly, admiringly, not because she was beautiful or kind, but because she carried something he never saw in anyone else, pure sincerity. One evening, Joshua caught a fever. Rachel panicked, rushing to hold him while Grant searched for medicine, pacing in fear. Rachel held the baby close, whispering reassurance, breathing slowly against his hair. Grant turned, watching her, and something shifted inside him. In that moment, seeing her protect a child that wasn't hers, love him without obligation, he whispered softly, "You're safe now," though he spoke it to both of them. Something changed after that. Their bond deepened, though neither named it. Grant began smiling again, easing into fatherhood with strength. Rachel found a home, a place where she mattered, and Joshua never cried the same way again. Weeks later, Grant asked her if she wanted to stay permanently, not as help, but as someone who belonged there. Rachel hesitated, overwhelmed, but she knew that a life built from kindness was stronger than one built from fear. Before the ending, if this story moved something inside your heart, please like this video, share it, and subscribe. Your support keeps stories like this alive and spreading light. Eventually, Grant and Rachel built a family, not through perfection, not through plans, but through moments of unexpected grace. Joshua grew healthier, happier, surrounded by stability and warmth. Rachel smiled more than she ever remembered. Grant woke up feeling safe, knowing he didn't lose everything after all. And somewhere along that journey, the storm that brought them together became nothing more than distant rain. Before the story ends, comment below. Kindness saves hearts. Because sometimes, just sometimes, the most beautiful new beginnings come from the most unexpected storms.